Hey guys, it's Maymay, and I'm excited to bring you a project that starts with 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares, but turns into the coolest kaleidoscope feature you've ever seen. Let's get started. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut for yourself 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. Now I'm making these for Christmas and I want them to be a little fancy, so I'll show you what my plan is. So I pulled out the stamp set called Glistening Once Again. I love this set, and I'm going to be using this guy. Now, this technique I'm going to show you today is very much a quilt technique. I learned it in the quilt world, and I wanted to do it over there, but I'm like, I think with paper I could do this easier. The trick to this project is your 8 squares have to have the very same pattern on them. So what I've done here, this is my stamp wheel. I'm going to turn it. I have it crooked, but anyway. I just put in one of the little alignment guides just kind of floating. It really doesn't matter as long as I set my stamp in the same position every time. So that's my 2.5 inch square. And you can see here I've got my stamp where it's going to stamp right across the page. Now, I did this as a tester in just black ink on craft, and it was beautiful. But I want this to be a little fancier. So today we're going to emboss it. Now, because I'm going to be embossing, I'm going to need to use an anti-static pad on my cardstock. I'm not really worried about this getting on to my platform here. The reason is I can wash that with water and that'll wash away and it'll be perfectly fine. It's actually cool because I take a lot less chance of getting my fingerprints on here. So now I'm going to take my stamp and ink it with some Versamark. Any watermark ink pad or embossing ink pad you've got will work. So just ink this up. And the cool thing about using my stamp wheel, I can multiple stamp it if I need to. So put this guy down and get my impressible. Press that down. And now I'm going to check it. And I'll have to tilt it a little bit to see it. But that looks pretty good. And honestly, if the image is a little bit rugged or a little skipped, that doesn't bother me because it'll just add to the look at the end. All right, I like to use a spatula to help me lift. Plus, it'll keep my fingerprints off. So just lift that off of there, grab it by the sides, and sit it aside. Now I need to do that 7 more times. I'm going to be using Brutus Monroe Gilded embossing powder, and so I've got all of these embossed. I'm going to get my tweezers for this. Just grabbing the corner. I'm going to pour this on top. Tap that down a bit. Look how pretty that is. Then I'm going to heat emboss this. So I need to do this 7 more times. Using my glass mat and my little magnets to hold this down, I'm going to heat emboss this with my heat tool that I am preheating. So I'm going to turn it on for about 30 seconds before I ever take it to the project. And because this is my glass mat, it won't hurt anything whenever I'm putting the heat on it. Isn't that beautiful? Now I just need to do that 7 more times. All right, so I got them all embossed, and then I decided they needed a little bit of color. So Shannon and I took a color each. She did the green and I did the red, and we got these all colored. And I think that's really going to add to the effect that we're about to do. All right, so you have 8 identical squares. Before I make these, I want to tell you that while we were coloring, we were talking, and I did find 2 other ways to do this. One using paper and one using embossing folder, so don't go anywhere. Stick around to watch that too. All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to take every one of your squares, and if you've done a lot of work on them like we have, this is going to be a little nerve-wracking, but this is what you do, okay? You're going to cut this in half this way and this way, all right? So because these are 2.5 inch squares, we're going to put this in our trimmer at 1 1/4, and you want to make sure you have 1 1/4 on this side, and you have 1 1/4 on this side. That way you know you're cutting them in the middle. Okay, and then you're going to cut right at the center. Then we're going to pull this out and turn it, put it back on 1 1/4. I do them individually. I don't stack them up side by side and cut them at the same time. So you see I'm going to do this one by itself. So I've made that, and then I'm going to do this one the same way. Now I'm only going to do this one time for you on camera, but then I'm going to go do it 8 times off camera. And so here's what happens. We've got these like this, okay? And again, like I said, this is nerve-wracking if you're like, I just did all that work. Now we're going to take these guys and turn them into half square triangles, okay? So we're going to go from one corner to the top corner and cut these into triangle shapes. And then you can just stack them back up. We want to make 8 stacks of these. So you're going to cut through every single one you made. and you're going to have them all end up looking like this. So that's what I want to do with all 8. I want to cut them into that shaping. So I'll do another one with you. I said I was only going to do one, but I'll show you one more. So we're going to take the piece, and honestly, you don't have to worry too much about putting in here exactly the same as far as like, is this up or is this down? Because we're cutting them the same. What will matter is when we stack them up. So I cut that in half at 1 1/4. Then I'm going to cut this in half at 1 1/4. And listen, check your measures every time, because if you're like me, you get going too fast. You might even want to put a piece of tape there, like at the 1 1/4 mark, so you know you're at the right spot. Because if not, you'll mess yourself up. Let's cut this one. All right, so we're going to cut across. And then what I want to do with these that I'm cutting here is I want to stack them with their same pieces over here. So this is this one, and this is this one. You will be so happy if you go ahead and take the time to do this. Just as you cut these diamonds, stack them all up. All right, the most important thing you need to pay attention to, which I should have pointed out to you earlier, you want to make sure you're cutting them the same, okay? So when you go to cut this, don't cut this way because this guy goes in that direction. So just double check. I'm going to hold him like this, and I'm going to cut him this way. If you accidentally do it, it's not the end of the world. You can tape the piece back together, or you can glue another piece behind it, especially if you've done all this work. But try very hard to pay attention. So when you pick them up, double check, see where your cut is, and it goes this way. Everyone needs to be cut exactly the same. Because if you don't, when you go to put this together, the effect just won't work. All right, I'm going to go through and finish all of these out. Okay, so I have all of them cut and stacked up. Each of these sections are 8 little triangles stacked on top of each other. Each one of these are going to make a kaleidoscope star. So you can make 8 kaleidoscopes out of this, okay? I think I'm going to go with this one to start with. I want you to see how this works, okay? So I've cut for myself a little square. This is just like 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. It doesn't really matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in half. When I say it doesn't matter, it just needs to hide behind your star. I'm going to fold this like this just to kind of give myself a starting point, just a line to start gluing on. And here's what you do. You're going to take one of these triangles. You only have to line up the first one really, okay? And you're going to use, I think I've got 2 there. I don't. You're going to use that center line and your cross line, and you're going to put this guy down just like that, okay? Now I'm going to do a dry run for you to see it before we glue it down, okay? Now what you'll do is you're going to take the next little triangle, okay? And we want to lay it exactly the same, but this time we're going to come out like this, okay? So you see how we're going to just kind of butt them up against each other. And if you look at it, they're laid the same. So their little points just continue around. See that? Same thing again. We're going to lay it in the same sort of direction. And you see why you only have to really line up one of them. And what's happening underneath doesn't really matter because it's going to get covered up anyway. And look what's going to happen here. This is so neat. We're going to make this kaleidoscope star. I just think it is so cool. And listen, if you get one out of place, you'll know it because that secondary pattern that's forming in the middle won't show. It'll be weird. It'll have like a break. I'll show you what I mean. Like if you put one like this, you see it kind of breaks the pattern. But if you keep going, look, we're almost going to get a whole other flower in the middle. It's going to look like a different flower. I just think this is so neat. And I cannot wait to try it with those other 2 ways that I was telling you about. Look how cool that is. So I'm going to glue this down and then show you how I turn it into a card. Isn't that beautiful? And imagine if you'd have done these to the inside. Why don't I real quick make all of these up so we can see all the different ones? Let me show you this too. You might always want to put, if you have like a leaf to the inside, but it's also pretty if you mix it up and maybe put a different pattern to the inside. Maybe have the darker. With this one having so much pattern, you could do it like this and see what those fronds turn out making the pattern like. You know what I'm saying? You don't always have to have it look like a flower. It can just look like a kaleidoscope. I do think I like the leaf to the inside on this one, or the petal, I should say. Look how cool they are, guys. Every one of them created a new flower. Isn't that cool? Like, even though this was one flower that we did, we stamped one flower. Now you can see there's another one in the center. And I'm going to tell you what's so funny. You will get twisted up when they're, especially when they're very similar. They tend to start to look the same. And I noticed in the very first one I did, I had one of the wrong petals in it and I had to find where it went. But now we're all good. Everybody's good now. And isn't that cool? All right, let's put it on a card. Now the card that I'm making for this one is what's called as a book fold card. So it's a regular A2 card scored at 5.5, but I also scored it here, and that is 4.25 from the edge is where I scored that one. And what'll happen is we'll glue this section down. This just gives me a good square spot to put this on the front. Anytime I'm doing quilt blocks or whatever, these are the kind of bases I like to do. You don't have to, you do them any way you want. This is just the one I typically do. And this card will then open like this. And so we'll have that little area there that we can put our star on. I'm going to put my star like this, but it needs paper behind it. So I have this piece that is a red plaid that I think will really show off the one that I chose. So I'll glue this down here. And over here on the side, I want to bring some glitter to this side. I'm going to glue a piece of glitter down and then some green on top of it and leave myself a place to add a sentiment. So this is a cool thing too. Like if you wanted to make a bunch of these ahead of time, but you don't really know what sentiment you want to put on it, that's okay. Just leave yourself some room for one. You can come back and do that. I'm going to put this green on here because I just want kind of the outline of that gold. And then this is a space I can put my sentiment. This guy, I'm going to pop up right there in the middle. So I just added a little foam tape and I'm just going to place him down like this. And I think he'd even be pretty, even though we heat embossed him, he might be pretty also to go ahead and emboss him one more time with the embossing machine. That might look really cool too. I just love how this secondary flower appeared. Let's try this using dry embossing. Now, I have no idea how this will turn out, but here's what we did. I took some cardstock. Shannon took a piece of red and cut it down 2.5 by 2.5 squares. Then she embossed them exactly the same. That's the trick. Everything has to be done exactly the same, right? So I'm laying these out so you can see all of them, okay? So we have 4. Oh, she made extras. Shannon makes extras in case I mess up. Isn't that smart? Yeah, I think so too. So we have 8 of our squares, 2.5 by 2.5. Now, all we have to do, like I said, is emboss them in the very spot, every single one of them. And now we can do that cut apart thing like we just did. So let's get our trimmer. And we're going to put this into the trimmer. I've been using the bottom. Let me show you this. I think this makes it a little easier for this, the way I'm having to see. I'm using the bottom down here where it's 1.25, and then I can just slide my blade down just like that, move it to the side, turn it over, 1.25. By the way, this is just the size I made. You could change the size. That's not a problem. I just thought this fit that card style pretty easily. Same thing here. Cut that in half. Now, I want to put them back together the correct way. I should have paid attention. There we go. So that's how they go, like that. I'm going to leave those sitting here so I can reference them. And I'm just going to keep going, cutting all of these into 4 pieces to start with. The cool thing about these guys is they kind of fit like a puzzle piece. So it's pretty easy to know if you've got them all right, because if one of them doesn't fit, that's not where it goes. Because these nest together so well, I'm doing them 2 at a time, and that seems to be fine because the little pieces fit together like a puzzle. So I don't seem to be losing anything by doing that. So I got everything stacked up, and because I'm super anxious to see how this goes, what I'm going to do is just do one. Just going to complete one really quick. I'm going to move all these out of the way, and I'm going to go down here. And like I said, cutting these 2 at a time is going to work because they nest into each other. So I'm going to cut across them. And we always want to make sure every single time we cut, we're doing the same angle. So check that and check that. It doesn't hurt to check it 2 or 3 times. You will not believe, I actually messed up 3 different ones of these, even though I thought I was checking. So you need to check. Not of these, but of the ones we just did. I had considered ink dragging these, and that probably would be pretty, but I think I can do it after they're done. And then I won't have to wait for the ink to dry because I would use my white alabaster, which would take a little time to dry. This way I won't have to. Okay, so let me see which ones I want to use. Those or those. I really think these might be pretty. We may do both. Let's see. Let's this one out. I also think I'm going to use the same color for my piece behind just in case. And notice how I didn't even cut a square. It's just a piece I kind of cut off the page, and I'm not going to fold it. I noticed that I don't really have to do that. All right, so let's put some glue down. And then let's just get started. We're going to put this guy in. I'm using a little more glue this time than I did last time, but that's because these pieces are embossed, and I'm not exactly sure where it's all going to stick down. So just make sure you're putting the same shape down and lining your points up in the center. There we go. And I do believe using the same color underneath is pivotal because you will see through this one some. Ooh, it's stuck to me. You will see through this one because of the embossing. It doesn't lay super flat, so there's some lifts, especially from the side. It kind of looks like a pinwheel. That's what Amber said. She's like, oh, it looks like a pinwheel. You probably could turn it into a pinwheel. The glue's not dry, but look how pretty that is. Look at that little pattern that it creates in the middle, and then the berries on the outside. I think I will ink drag it, but I'm going to get everything good and dry. Get it all lined up where it goes good. I think I'll put one more together so we can see two. Look at that one. It looks like a Ferris wheel in the middle. Isn't that cool? All right, let's ink drag. So I got some alabaster ink. This is white alabaster ink, and let's just see what happens. I think that's pretty cool. Let's do the other one. I got a little heavy-handed on this one, but I still think it's pretty. And I'll show you what I would do with it. I would kind of do it very similar to how we did the last one, where I would lay it out like so. And I really liked the glitter for a little shine. I'll put that here and put this one here. And then let's say if this one was dry, of course he's not dry, then we could pop him up right here. And that would be pretty. Or we can mix other colors in, bring something, maybe some black in there to ground that. But wouldn't that be pretty to use that there? And you really could use it in any way you want. I just think these are so cool. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to do it the traditional way, okay? And what do I mean by that? Let's move these so they can get dry. The traditional way, which I thought I wouldn't be able to do, is with fabric, what you do is you cut 8 pieces from the very same pattern. Do you see how these are exactly the same? I thought I couldn't do this because I didn't think I had 8 pieces of the same cardstock, but Shannon reminded me that we had some in our classroom that we had used for a kit where everybody got the same page and we had some left over, so it is going to work. And let me show you how this works. This is really cool. I'm going to do exactly what we've done with the others to get this prepped. I'll cut it in half, and then I'll do all my little diamond shapes, and we'll come back together and put these in the class. Okay, you guys, I have to tell you, hands down, this is my favorite. Now, I've already done 7 of these, but I had to do one with you watching. So this is that beautiful paper, all cut exactly the same way. What you have to decide is where you want your center to be. I'm going to let this be the center. I'm going to place this down on my cardstock here, and then I'm just going to work my way around. And the trick with these pattern pages is you want to get the tips lined up perfectly. So take your time to get that center lined up. When I say the tips, I mean these points. You want them lined up right here really well. So just place it, put that glue down, and just work it to it. And look how it's already starting to appear. You guys, seriously, this is gorgeous. I'm really kind of glad I did not realize we had these pieces to match, because I don't think I would have tried the other techniques. And I'm glad I did those too, because if you're like me and you don't necessarily have 8 pieces, because this is really all, I don't have a lot of 8 pieces, you can make your own cardstock using your stamps, using embossing folders, and you can still make these little pinwheel kaleidoscopes. I just think they're incredible. And I love doing this and watching something new appear. This is going to look like a wreath. Isn't that going to be beautiful? All from the very same piece of cardstock, same cut. One more to place. Look at that wreath it's creating. And then I'm going to show you the 7 others that I've already done. They're gorgeous. All right, so there's one. Put it over there. Here's another. Every one creates, look at that. Looks like a really thin poinsettia. Look at this one. Looks like a wreath with a peppermint inside. This one. And just when I thought that I wouldn't have a pretty pattern from a piece, I was shocked how gorgeous. Look at that. Every one is so beautiful. Can you see why I wanted to do this technique? I know, for real. Now, If you think this is beautiful, even if you're not a sewist or a quilter or anything like that, go check out some of these done in fabric. You will not believe the technique and how these sewists and quilters are making this happen. It is so beautiful. For me, this is easy. It's just triangles glued together, but they have to do sewing and everything and make it work, and it's really a cool thing to watch. But there you go, guys. Those are our pinwheels. Let me bring this one over. This is the one we stamped and embossed. Now, this one I did not color, but let's bring one that we did color over, or a few of them. These are colored. And they'd be even pretty if you did them in marker. We did them in color pencil, but I think if I did them in marker and gave them a little brighter color, that would be so pretty. And then also our stars, which are still drying. It didn't take that long to put those together, but there's one. I like that too. I think there's a place for all of it, but seriously though, this is incredible. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I like trying new stuff. Even though this may not be something you do every day, it's something fun and something different. And I bet some of you right now are already going through your paper stash wanting to be able to do this. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, bye now.